Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the high point of the evening. We are honored to have Lieutenant General Loren Reno as our distinguished guest speaker this evening. Lieutenant General Reno served in the United States Air Force for 38 years after receiving his commission in 1974 as a graduate of the Officer Training School. After retiring in 2012, he became the first Dean of the Cedarville University School of Business Administration in 2012. He has led small and large organizations doing just about everything the Air Force does. He was the Air Force's senior logistician with policy oversight and budget advocacy for 2007,000 maintainers, logisticians, civil engineers, and security forces men and women. Before retiring in 2012, Lieutenant General Loren M. Reno served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Installations and Mission Support, Headquarters, United States Air Force, Washington, D.C., where he was responsible to the Air Force Chief of Staff for leadership, management, and integration of Air Force logistics readiness, aircraft and missile maintenance, civil engineering, and security forces. His assignments include key positions you would expect of only the best officers our nation has to offer. You can read about them in your program, but it should be noted that he served successfully while leading air mobility logistics support for operations Noble Eagle, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest and tonight's guest speaker, Lieutenant General Reno.
Colonel Wetterstrom, Madam Dean, Dr. Kane, Colonel Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to be here. I thank you, Colonel Thomas, for inviting an airman to come and address such a fine group of soldiers. It's a real honor to be here. You know, before I get started, I've been watching the decorations of the men and women that have passed by me in the receiving line. I would just like to ask all of those who wear the Bronze Star to stand in place and be recognized, please. Let's give them a good round of applause, please. I'd like to do one other recognition. We have a soldier who has served for 39 years, Command Sergeant Major Puther. Are you here? Would you please come front and center? I'd like to just tell you a little story. I know that biography may sound pretty impressive, but I'm reminded of a time when I was at the Pentagon. I was on my way to a meeting. This happened just a couple years ago, and there was a young man in my outer office that was not all that impressed. You see, there was a staff sergeant who was getting ready to deploy, and he worked for me, and I knew who he was, but he was in civilian clothes one day, and it turned out to be the last day before he deployed. He was out processing. So I was talking to the orderly room function there in the front office and getting some paperwork signed, and he had his 4 or 5-year-old son along with him. And I thought, you know, that's really great. A little bit of father-son time the last day before he deploys for 6 months. I thought, you know, I'm just going to pause. I'm on my way to a meeting, but I'm just going to pause and affirm what I see here. And officer candidates, cadets, you need to do that. When you see something that's being done right, you need to recognize it. And so I stopped. The father was standing in a brace. I mean, his shoulders were back, his chin was in. It was general this and general that. Yes, sir, 10 bags full. And so I looked over at his boy, and his boy was laying on the couch, had his feet up on the cushion, his head was on the armrest, his arm was flipped up over the back of the couch, and he was just laying there. And his dad was giving him the get up whenever I wasn't looking. Boom, then he'd be back in the brace. I knew what was going on. So I thought, you know, I need to defuse this a little bit. So I went over and kneeled down on my knees right by the lad there, and I noticed he had some moisture on his hand. I didn't know what that was about, but it's okay. So I start talking to him, and he warms up to me pretty quick. It doesn't take but a minute, and we're kind of chatting and asking him, you know, what's he doing, and does he like to play baseball, and who's his favorite team, and how's the weather, and what's he think about his dad deploying? Well, I asked him, you know, what do you think about your dad deploying, going away for 6 months? He said, I don't care. I get an ice cream cone this afternoon. You're now 4 years old. They can't think past tomorrow. So it's about 5 minutes here, and I'm having a real good chat with him. I think, you know, I really need to get on to the meeting I was headed to. So I stand up, and I hold my hand out to shake hands with the young boy. Well, he does not reciprocate. And after you've been holding your hand out there for about 5 seconds, and the person doesn't hold your hand and shake it back, you start to feel a little bit awkward. So my hand's out there, and he's not doing it. Then I look, and he's going like this. He's wiping his hand on the front of his shirt. I don't have any idea what that's about, so I start doing the same thing. Start wiping my hand on the front of my uniform. And he says loud enough for everybody in the outer office to hear, including his dad, he says, "So you still suck your thumb too?" Now, I didn't get any respect that day, but I thank you for the respect on the introduction. Well done. You know, I'd like to do one other thing, and I'd like to ask Cadet Winfield if you'd help me. Would you come stand in the middle of the floor here? I'd like you to be in a position where you can see all of the cadets. Now, this is just for the cadets. If you're the guest of a cadet, you can just sit back and enjoy. But all cadets are eligible. I have one of my coins right here that I want to give to one of you tonight. Now, I'm going to start reading a speech that somebody made some years ago. And if you know who was making that speech, 1, where they made that speech, 2, and what year it was in, you get all 3 of those elements right, and you're the first one to stand to your feet and be recognized by Cadet Winfield, you may have one of my coins. On the other hand, if you don't get all 3 elements right, then you may come forward, gentlemen, and present yourself and demonstrate your ability to execute 20 push-ups. Ladies, when you stand to be recognized before you give your answer, would you just identify the man that's going to come and do your push-ups for you if you get it wrong? And you may pay him back next week when you're more suitably attired in PT. Cadet Winfield, do we have the ROE good? Yes, sir. Okay. As soon as you know, jump right up, middle of the sentence. Who, where, and when. The shadows are lengthening for me. The twilight is here. My days of old have vanished, tone and tint. They have gone glimmering through the dreams of things that were. Their memory is one of wondrous beauty, watered by tears and coaxed and caressed by the smiles of yesterday. I listen vainly, but with thirsty ear, for the witching melody of faint bugles blowing reveille, of far drums beating the long roll. In my dreams I hear again and again the crash of guns, the rattle of musketry, the strange, mournful mutter of the battlefield. But in the evening of my memory, always I come back to West Point. Always there, echoes and re-echoes, duty, honor, country. Today marks my final roll call with you, but I want you to know that when I cross the river, my last conscious thoughts will be of the Corps and the Corps and the Corps. I bid you farewell. End quote. Okay, loud enough. Sound off, please. Where did it happen? Where was he when he said it? Did you? I didn't hear you say where.
I don't know where it was. I don't know it's an award.
Oh, come on up. You can offer 20 push-ups then. Okay, who was second?
I'll take a push-up. At West Point.
Please be recognized before you speak.
Cadet Eisner, Douglas MacArthur, West Point 1962.
Do you want to try the month?
I don't know that, sir.
You've got the coin.
17, 18, 19, 20.
How about a hand? Well done, young man. It was on the 12th of May, 1962, General Douglas MacArthur at West Point. They were in the dining hall. If you remember, it's the famous duty, honor, and country speech. I'm reminded of another old soldier that I met in Muskogee, Oklahoma, about 5 years ago. His name was Skipper McClendon. Skipper McClendon invited me to his home to tell me his story. And I brought with me PBS television because I knew an inkling of what he was going to tell me. And here's what he told me as I sat in his living room. He said, I enlisted in the Army in 1938. Now that's before we got involved in the war. And he went to basic training at Fort Sill. And then he was in the infantry. And he went to Francis E. Warren Army Base. And he was there in 38 and 39. And he would do his infantry work by day. And at the end of the afternoon, he would go to the other side of the field and he would watch the flying operations, the aviation. Back to his infantry the next day, back to watch them fly the next day. Day after day, he would come at the end of the day and watch the flying operations. And one day, the flight instructor came up to him and said, McClendon, what are you doing over here? You're supposed to be in the infantry. He said, I grew up in Muskogee, Oklahoma. I have wanted to fly for my whole life. Well, this is 1939. And the instructor said, look, if you can come up with $5 a month, I'll teach you how to fly. It's about all he made back in the day. But he came up with $5 a month, and sure enough, he learned how to fly. 1939. He PCS'd to Lowry Field, Denver, Colorado, another Army base. At Lowry Field, he continued to fly on the side, 1940 into 1941. December 7th, 1941, Sunday, the radios broadcast the news of what happened at Pearl Harbor. And on Monday morning, December the 8th, the garrison commander at Lowry Field called for Bill McClendon to come to his office and report in a military manner, which he did. He stood before the base commander. He knew he was in big trouble. He didn't know what it was. Skipper McClendon told me that if the squadron commander wanted to see you, you were in trouble. If the group commander wanted to see you, you were in big trouble. And his dry sense of humor, he said, if the garrison commander wanted to see you, you might as well just pack your bags. And so he showed up, reported in. The garrison commander said, I've been looking at your record, McClendon. I see you know how to fly. McClendon said, yes, sir, I do. He said, we're in for a long war. I'm sending you to officer school in Miami, Florida, and you're going to fly. And so McClendon went off to Miami, got his commission, and he went to the Pacific Theater, and he found himself in Port Moresby, New Guinea, flying P-38s. He thought he had died and gone to heaven. He was living the dream. He was a fighter pilot, flying in a combat zone and having a great time. Until his group commander came to him one day and said, McClendon, what do you know about boats? McClendon said, I don't know anything about boats. I'm from Muskogee, Oklahoma. I guess the pointy end must be the front and the flat end must be the back. He said, you know enough about boats. You're in charge of the 21 boats I just commandeered off the local economy. Now it's in 1943. MacArthur's been kicked out of the Philippines. He's been in Australia. Now he's in New Guinea, and he's starting to move back north. And we're going to have a lot of Allied aviators fall into the Pacific Ocean, and we're going to need boats to pick them up. So you find people to man those 21 boats, and you're in charge of the biggest one. You got any questions? He wasn't making a recommendation, I think, the way the Air Force does it. He understood. So he went and found crews to man the boats. There were 3 others that were on his on his boat, he plus 3 others. And for the rest of the war, he never flew again. He drove a boat. Some of the missions were a day or 2. Sometimes it was up to 6 months. He sailed into and behind the Japanese lines. Over the course of the rest of the war, Skipper McClendon and his 21 boats picked up 722 downed airmen. And he was never decorated for even one. There was no Bronze Star. There was no Commendation Medal. There was nothing. We were at war, and it was about winning the war. So he went on in the Army Air Corps, and it became the Air Force in 1947, as you know. And then he retired in 1964 at the exalted rank of Major. Not a very successful career? I beg to differ with you. 722 lives. So I sat on the living room couch with Skipper McClendon. He was right here on my right, and the cameras were rolling. And I said, Skipper, how did you feel when the group commander said you were in charge of the boats and you were going to drive boats for the rest of the war? How did you feel about that? Your heart's desire was to fly, and now you're a fighter pilot, and now you're going to drive boats for the rest of the year. I'll never forget. He sat for only a moment, this 88-year-old man. He turned his head to the left. He looked me right in the eye. He said, I took an oath. I knew what he meant. I took that same oath. Ladies, gentlemen, you're about to take that same oath. I, Loren M. Reno, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I'm about to enter, so help me God. I knew what he meant. He said, I took an oath. He didn't take an oath to be in the Air Corps. He didn't take an oath to fly P-38s. He didn't take an oath to do what he wanted. He took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to discharge his duties well and faithfully. That's the oath he took. That's what he was talking about. And I understood. So I wonder how it is for you. Y'all are about ready to take an oath. Seniors, congratulations for coming as far as you have. This is amazing. Colonel Thomas, you must be so proud, these young men and women about to put on a second lieutenant's rank and lead men and women and maybe into combat and maybe order some of them to their death and maybe give their lives. You must be very proud. But Skipper McClendon said he took an oath, and I understood what he meant. And when you raise your hand every time you say that oath, I just ask you to think about it. It's not about P-38s. It's not about what you signed up for. It's defending the Constitution and serving this great country that we have. I served for 38 years. I was thinking about making it a career. That was supposed to be funny. But I took an oath. I took an oath. And you're about to do the same. I congratulate you on your upcoming service, about to finish ROTC training. It's been a pleasure meeting each of you as we came in the door. We don't do it that at Air Force dining in or dining outs, and I think that's a great opportunity to meet all these young people. I thank you for letting me come and talk to you. God bless you all.